Hey, there we are. We're back. It's been a little while since we did one of these. Oh, hey, my phone. Let's get talking, Alex. We are reviewing Spider-Man.
All right. So,
So it looks like
myself and Woody just recently saw Spider-Man
Enter
into
the Spider-Verse.
the Spider-Verse.
And here I am just blowing the beginning of the video. But we're keeping it. So, hey, look, we're in a new headquarters, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Into the Spider-Verse. Well, this could be our spoiler video. So our non-spoiler portion is it rocks. Spoiler, it has Spider-Man in it. Okay, so Alex, how many spider webs out of whatever your random rating system of the week is?
I rate this as seven out of 7 Spider-Men.
Well, I always do a 5-star, and I would give this a 5 out of 5.
Out of the Spider-Man that's in there, I give it a full.
Oh yeah.
pairing
Okay.
of, like,
All right. Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
them.
Full 5 web shooters.
Yeah.
So this movie was made by Sony, not in connection with Marvel. It basically came out of the fact that Sony, in their dwindling returns were basically running the Spider-Man brand into the ground. Had, in order to even have a chance of keeping it, worked out a deal with Marvel, like a kind of like you get the kids this weekend, we get them that weekend kind of deal. So Spider-Man is, as it turns out, is on contract for 5 movies with Marvel, but actual 6 movies is in his deal, which means that after Spider-Man Far From Home ends, technically he can appear in one of their movies.
Oh, interesting.
The same actor. So there's a bit of...
Well, that's definitely an interesting part. I mean, the fact of, like, previously we've had multiple actors doing certain characters,
Sure.
and not crossing over into different distributors, studios, whatever you want to call it.
I'm actually kind of hoping that there is like a live-action Spider-Verse story one day where they bring back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in an MCU movie with parallel universes. But anyways...
That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would be cool.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like getting off topic, as we usually do. The so the big question is what Sony is going to do, okay? And whether or not they're going to continue their deal with Marvel or take Spider-Man back. And initially, it was looking like they were going to go, well, when the deal's over, it's like they were exploiting Marvel to build up goodwill with the fans, and then trick the fans into coming back after they were losing viewers. When because I don't even actually know anyone who saw Amazing Spider-Man 2. Except maybe Harrison. He might have gone just because he has to, because he's a Spider-Man freak. He's completely addicted to Spider-Man. But I think he's the only one, now that I think about it. We didn't.
Right. But then again, I mean, like, in theater, I didn't actually see any of Andrew Garfield
fair enough.
Movies. Yeah. Just mixture of... I'm not major movie buff, so
right.
That's why definitely I'm doing a movie review.
Except when I drag you to these films.
So this is actually, to be honest, this is one that I was actually looking forward to.
Yeah, me too.
In the regards of, if you watch our vidcast about like comics and such, like one of the things that you probably will notice is how much I talk about cartoons.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a reason. I love animation. And this was definitely one of those things where it's like, this really appealed to me. Because this felt like it was a mixture of that CG, that
it was
3D that was...
It was a really edgy, interesting style. And, and in fact, Sony tried to copyright their style. Or patent it so nobody else could do it.
And I get that, of like trying to do that, but that's like saying to an artist of like, oh, you did this project for us, now you can never use your style ever again, which is total crap.
We own it. Well,
right. But like one of the things that I really liked was like how, and especially for me, especially like how I've talked about Sam Keith and David David Mack. They're two artists that do mixed media, and in this film it felt very mixed media, and it was really sophisticated in that you had characters that were in different type of styles because they come from different parts of the multiverse,
right? Like how Spider-Man Noir was in black and white,
right? And also Spider-Ham was like a cartoon character.
Oh my god!
And then you had a
so
anime
much.
character, and on top of it, you had like the 1960s Spider-Man.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Well, I actually kind of wanted to come back around though to the because
I get it. I do
derailed my derail.
Yeah, well. So I'm going to finish off with one of the things about the animation that I did find interesting and kind of agitating at first, but I really got to love it, was that it almost had a stop animation kind of feel to it. The way that the characters moved remind me of like Nightmare Before Christmas, and there's just a different way of like how the frame rate looked in comparison to say
that's interesting.
Shrek or like How to Train Your Dragon or various other.
Because to me it seemed very seamless.
It felt like there was just there was just something about like frame rate or the way that it was animated where they're just I don't know, pauses or whatever it was.
I thought the dot matrix colors were kind of neat.
Yeah.
Very throwback. Well, the part I was trying to get to before is like we were talking about like rights issues, right? Is that Sony until this year was basically failing as a studio. And there's a whole lot of information on that. I don't want to spend a whole video get into it because other people have gotten into it more thoroughly than me. The Midnight's Edge channel has some really good research if you want to check out what they have. But the thing which is interesting, like Sony had to do the deal with Marvel because they were basically had a failing intellectual property. That they were very close to losing Spider-Man because the movies were just declining and they were damaging the brand, and that like because like I didn't even bother to go see Amazing Spider-Man 2 because anyways but then this year, since they didn't have Spider-Man, they had put out 2 movies, which was Spider-Verse and Venom, right? So I don't know how you felt about it. I've been pretty vocal where I wanted it to fail because I didn't want Sony to knock this off, and Spider-Man needs to go back to Marvel.
And I get it. I mean, it's a mixed baggage because it's kind of that same level as the properties under Fox.
Talk about mismanagement,
right? But I mean, it's kind of that level of. I think Deadpool for us was that surprising golden gem and like this golden goose, and yet there has been some real stinkers within their like properties.
Oh well, there's.
That goes into different opinions.
Well, but mentioning the Midnight's Edge, they actually go into a lot of detail on what happened with the X-Men. They're like really interesting. It was actually crazy. Is the guy that ruined the X-Men franchise is now in charge of Sony, which is it worries me. But anyways, so Venom had, according to this, had a budget between 100 and 116 million.
Now, did you actually watch Venom?
Screw that! I'm not going to give them my money. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to.
Okay.
My girlfriend wants to see it, but not bad enough to drag me to it. So 854.5 million is what it's showing as the final box office. Not counting second run theaters. Lord knows what they make. That doesn't include merchandising. I haven't seen the movie. Looking at it critically, I'm not really hearing anything good about it. I'm hearing that it's basically a popcorn movie.
I think that goes into like different points of view. Like for some of the channels that I've listened to, the ones where it's less individuals that read comics on a regular basis or semi-regular basis, like you, myself, Doc, and anyone else that's been part of this channel, has that kind of similar kind of mindset of, the review channels where it's talking about comics and watching movies and such. the Venom movie has kind of had that bad rapport. But like watching other channels that talk about just movies and such, most of the time, I wouldn't say it's completely favorable, but at the same time, the Venom movie sounds like it's enjoyable enough for somebody that might not know the intellectual property behind it.
Well, looking it over, I think Venom was an accidental success. Because see, one of the things that occurred was Venom was supposed to be rated R, an edgy rated R, which was interesting to me. I might have gone to see it if they'd gone with the rated R.
But kind of like the same way as Deadpool, where here's this property that.
Well, I'm actually excited to see Once Upon a Deadpool.
Except
that I couldn't fit it into my schedule.
Right.
So.
But I think it's like that character actually works quite well with the changing the rating.
Oh, I think Deadpool will be fine as PG-13. Well, you don't have to.
well, it's like the reason why I say that is like because one of his abilities is cosmic awareness or like fourth wall break.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, take a look. There's that symbol that says rated R.
Yeah.
Oh, look, now it's E.
Right. Well, I'm planning to buy the DVD of Once Upon a Deadpool. I mean, I really want to see it. I hope it's still in theaters. I want to go see it. It's just, with Christmas and everything else, and I just couldn't fit it in. But the thing with Venom, which is interesting, is it was supposed to be rated R, and they cut out 45 minutes of the movie to cut it down to a PG-13 rating, and changed blood and just various things, and so. What's basically going on is there's two things. Is one, Sony is trying to play nice with Marvel in hopes of it sounds like from what I've gathered they're trying to continue. They want to be part of the MCU.
Now that's interesting.
They want to play nice, but the other scenario is that if they get the Spider-Man back, right, once they've built up goodwill with the fans by tricking them because they've already tried to do this a couple times now where they've tried to make it look like Venom was part of the MCU and they were forced to recount, pull back. But the thing is the fans may not know the difference. So the current Spider-Man is in a Sony movie, say a Venom sequel or something, and suddenly, or a Sinister Six movie, which there's word that they would still want to do that. What the average moviegoer might suddenly think that Sony movies are part of the MCU. But
no, I get that.
But then okay, so. We have, but regardless though, we have this massive success with Venom, which isn't really enough to save the studio, but it's enough to save them this year, because they are, as I understand it, Sony is billions of dollars in debt with bad movies, and there's actually talk that Apple might be buying Sony, which that'll be interesting, because the transferal clause might revert all the Spider-Man characters back to Marvel if that happens. Now, currently, Spider-Verse is still in theaters. Had a budget of $90 million, and currently the box office is $138 million. I think it's on its second week now, or second or third week. What does it say?
At least of the recording of this video.
Okay, so it came out on December 1st. So December 14th in the United States. We're December 26th today, I think. So
yes, it is.
So it's just under 2 weeks. So this is interesting because that doesn't cover the marketing budget. Right now, the movie is a failure, if that's all it makes. Because marketing has to be about double the movie. But the thing is, though, is that a $90 million movie, you have a much lower threshold. And boy, it does not look like a $90 million movie. That movie looked amazing. Let's see. Probably it's still going to have an international release. I would imagine. I think this might just be showing United States numbers, but I mean, it's probably got another month that's going to be in theaters at least. So the thing is, though, is if Sony has, because the week it came out, it was number one movie, in the country. But if you have two successful films in 1 year, one of them I think is legit calculated. This is clearly successful. Spider-Verse. I think it's going to be a smash hit in relation to its budget. Venom was a accidental success, so what are the chances that Sony's going to be like, well, I guess screw Marvel, we don't need to share anymore. I'm worried that this may result in Spider-Man leaving the MCU, but of course, Disney has wonderful lawyers, so.
Right.
But yeah. So the other thing that's interesting too is Phil Lord and Chris Miller, right, are the ones that developed this movie and directed it, and they were the ones that did Solo and got fired from Solo. And they also did the Lego movie. And this certainly does feel kind of like the Lego movie. Like, it has a lot of similar comedic sensibilities, and it feels like a similar kind of film. And it's surprising that those two guys would be chosen to do a Star Wars movie, because they're going to deliver a comedy. And Solo should not have been a comedy. It's no surprise they got fired, but then they turn around and do this. Definitely did not hurt their careers. Like, they're going to go from this movie, that they're basically going to move on and just do something like they're going to get offers. If Sony doesn't manage to keep them for the sequel.
Right.
And
so I guess the real question comes up is that since we did talk about spoilers, should we actually talk about the movie itself?
Yeah. So let's jump into some of that. So the movie opens up with Spider-Man of this universe, and he's a blonde Spider-Man, right, as we discover, which I guess. It
makes it really feel like it's Andrew Garfield.
Actually, no, because all the stuff they referenced at the beginning of the movie of his life experience was from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. It's all like, I've actually heard it described as possibly, and like this might be intended to be kind of like that Spider-Man in the future, or kind of like an apology letter about some of the stuff that he got made to do, because he makes reference to the dance scenes and. And like
the Tobey Maguire one.
Yeah, Tobey Maguire. Yeah, like in Spider-Man 3, and how he's stopping. I think except for one thing, everything that they show happening in his life was in reference to a Sam Raimi movie. But and he's also blonde, which I was pointed out. I heard it pointed out that that's also could imply that he might be the Ben Reilly Spider-Man in that universe. That he's a Clone Saga Spider-Man. Which is interesting. And then, but he gets killed by the Kingpin. And then, and the Kingpin's, sinister six thugs.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting, like with the design of the characters. Kingpin was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, he was.
I gotta say, it's like
he was a giant marshmallow.
Oh god, but he had a certain level of presence.
Yeah,
and I think it was like, he felt like the Monstroso. He felt like a big, great whale.
Apparently, because all he was a big cube. And
to a certain extent.
Yeah, apparently what they did is they took another artist's version of the character from some comic book and they animated it, which he's the only person in that world that looks that way, and I think that's weird. But it didn't bother me as much as it has other people.
Yeah.
But it's like, from listening to reviews, that's like kind of like the only complaint is Kingpin that I've heard. I mean, and I think it was fine. It's a very interesting design. Like it's clearly not the main Marvel universe, because like all of the characters are different. Like they have a different Dr. Octopus is a female version, which ruins my plans for a Spider-Man story. And
no, not necessarily, but I mean, like, what was her name? Liz.
I don't remember.
But it was Octavius as the name. But
it was a female version. There was a version of the Green Goblin that was like bigger than the Hulk. It was gigantic. This big monster.
It's like
Scorpion looked cool. He had
thinking about that character, Green Goblin. They did something similar with that with, I think, Spectacular Spider-Man, the animated series that was on Disney DX XD whatever.
Yeah.
Had
he turned into a monster, right?
He turned into a monster. Very similar. I mean, like with so this particular Green Goblin, like you were saying, Woody, was size of the Hulk.
Oh, he's
had
bigger.
Bat
He
wings.
was like 20 feet tall. Well, the thing is, in the Ultimate Universe, their version of the Green Goblin transforms. So the version you were looking at was big, because I think a lot of the cartoons tend to look at the Ultimate Universe, and this clearly was
it's kind of that,
similar to that.
It's kind of that level of this movie, as much as like the rest of the MCU and the cartoons in general. It's like they can cherry pick with tons of lore, tons of information, and like tons of storylines that are basically like, these are the these are the cream of the crop, and this is how you form it into an interesting medium, from comic books, cartoons and actually into a movie.
Well,
like taking these story beats, or like taking these character designs of like aspects that you really like and moving forward to it.
Well, like Scorpion, they changed him a lot. He was a cyborg.
Oh,
He was crazy, and Prowler.
Oh, I loved him as like the Latino.
Yeah.
That Scorpion was, and then
yeah.
Prowler. I mean, like
they really stepped it up with Prowler.
It's like I can't even think of anything really of Prowler, because like I don't really remember him from the cartoons.
Well,
because I don't think they ever really had him.
He didn't really appear much. He's been a very periphery Spider-Man character. I remember the only reason I knew about him was I ran across him in the Marvel Universe books, and I thought he looked really interesting, and he's kind of a character I thought was cool, kind of like how I discovered Beta Ray Bill in the same way. I'm like, oh yeah, I love Beta Ray Bill. But what was odd for me, when I remember what stuck in my mind was that when they do the Marvel Universe books, I noticed that they were leaving out the ethnicity of the characters sometimes. And so the write-up on Prowl, he was originally a guy named Hobie Brown, and he's just an inventor who made a super suit. And they mentioned that he didn't get a promotion because his boss was racist. So I'm like, is he black? I mean, it doesn't say. And eventually I figured out he was. But then what they did is in the Ultimate Universe, Miles Morales, who is basically the title character in this movie for the Spider-Man film, but he's like half Hispanic, half black, right? And his dad's brother is the Prowler of the Ultimate Universe, who is of course the Prowler in this one. And in the Ultimate Universe, he was basically a thief and kind of a bad guy, whereas like in the main Marvel Universe, Hobie Brown's Prowler was just originally was a thief. Spider-Man kind of turned around to being a good guy. But in this one, he's like he's not a thief or necessarily a villain. He's like the villain. He's like a really almost like a Spawn-esque, enforcer for Kingpin.
Yeah,
and in fact,
I can definitely see like the enforcer part.
In fact, like, he has qualities that kind of reminded me of the Azrael Batman from the '90s, where he had the clawed gloves.
Right. Well, and it was definitely interesting to see like the designs. Like, it was never mentioned, I think, within saying the character's name, but like Tombstone.
Oh yeah, he was in there.
The gray skinned.
He's
and I thought it was really interesting to like have him enough of. He's very stoic to a certain extent. Like, I don't recall if he actually has any lines.
I think he has,
but it was very little.
Well, that's the thing is like he as a character, he shows up and he has. Like some really fun things that happen with him.
Right.
He doesn't do much, but when he does, it's kind of memorable. But it's also memorable. He's more like one of those background, because the movie's full of all these little Easter eggs for people that know what they're looking at. Because like when I saw Miles's uncle, like, oh yeah, he's the Prowler. Like I knew it immediately. And like Tombstone, like all his deal is he's just a little stronger normal person. He's got bleached skin and he works for the mob and he's kind of a mob boss. He's just tough enough to basically muscle his way up. And in this case, it had him being the right hand man of the Kingpin, where he was actually a full on mob boss before, in the regular universe.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, and I felt like it was really neat to see how, one, like all the Easter eggs, and two, how you had such kind of a smorgasbord of like characters, but yet they had enough time and enough like care placed into them so that no one really overshined like the main character.
Yeah, well, they also carefully picked the right ones too.
Oh yeah, and it's like, when we saw it, we also had our buddy Keenan come with, and
we had everybody with us.
And during part of the ride home, it was like got to talk to him when I dropped him off, and one of the characters that we were talking about was Spider-Ham, and the fact of I thought he was actually.
That Spider-Ham was in there.
True, but at the same time, I thought it was really good that they gave enough lines, they gave enough parts that he wasn't obnoxious. that they didn't overplay him. And like what I was saying to Keenan was,
Peter. By the way,
Misa gonna ruin movie,
right? With so if anyone listens, if you don't know, Marvel back in the day had this line called Star Comics, which was like a kids line, taking various, basically reinventing characters, in a kid's form. And somebody had this one-off character. It was Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, a pig, almost a Porky Pig type character in a Spider-Man suit, and going out, and he had everything, web shooters, whole deal, all spending his powers, and he's kind of in this weird fan favorite, kind of like Howard the Duck, who pops up from time to time.
Right, and it's actually interesting, like taking a little bit of a research into it. Spider-Ham actually has continued part of its line, like
he's never gone away.
I love the Venom version that they have.
Oh my god! Well,
because he's this big, if I remember right, boar or some creature, but he's got the the venom.
Did you ever read the Spider-Verse comic series that when it originally came out, that the movie was loosely based on? Spider-Ham is the one that saves the universe. Like he ends up. See, what happens is they have this plot which may be the plot of the sequel, which because there are these creatures called these human people called the Inheritors they're basically energy vampires. Very powerful, very hard to kill because they have this shit going on where they have like a cloning world, because they're able to travel from different universes, and they have like their Earth 1 is a clone plant, a cloning facility, and when they die they get sucked back and just get a fresh body. So even if they lose, they just keep coming.
And, and so very Emperor Palpatine of them.
Exactly. You get tired, but they're always fresh, right? And so they had this thing where they have to kill these three avatars of the Spider God, because there was this idea that there's like a mystical aspect of the powers, and so there were these three characters like the bride, the child, and the other, or the scion and the other, whatever they call it. Anyway, so basically the Spider Girl, who was Mayday Parker, like there was
the daughter of Mary Jane and Peter.
Because they had a story where Peter and Mary Jane had a daughter who miscarried, but then they did a series as What If She Survived, and she ended up having like an 80 issue run or something of her own series, and that was that was like the alternate publishing initiative before the Ultimate line, and so just before Ultimate Spider-Man, which is what Miles Morales is, right? And so what happened was that her little brother was the scion, and he gets taken. He's going to be sacrificed by the Inheritors. And so what they did was, the little switcheroo is they made Spider-Ham strip naked, and they put him in its thing's place. So when they went to kill it, there was nothing there. It's like, I got you, and the baby got taken away safely, but they weren't looking for him because they thought they had the baby.
Right.
So Spider-Ham got to save the universe.
Wow.
And which I think is the entire reason why Spider-Ham is in this movie, because he was such a prominent character in the Spider-Verse event, and so because they were clearly looking at that, Though I must say, I thought it was an interesting decision to have Nicolas Cage be Spider-Man Noir, and I think he did a fantastic job. But I don't like that it's a different Spider-Man Noir than the one that's in the comic books that we reviewed. The actual Spider-Man Noir isn't a joke. He's a serious character that I would love to see that movie. I mean, I get it. I mean, because I don't see Nicolas Cage's character carrying a film.
Well, I mean, Nicolas Cage has carried films to a certain extent. I mean,
no, it's not that Spider-Man. But
that's interesting because, like, I guess I didn't really pay attention to the fact of like who was doing the voicing, but I didn't realize that it was Nicolas Cage.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, just enough of like it was entertaining enough. I felt like, there's that level of changing the material enough to like have it where what type of audience that you're going for, and it's like this was PG. And I thought
it was PG-13, wasn't it? Well, because Kingpin beat Spider-Man to death, it has to be PG. It can't be PG.
No. Well,
Because see, the thing is,
I don't know. I
is like,
guess with Watership Down, I mean that being rated U for everybody.
Well, the rules were a little different 20 years ago. But okay, so like, because the thing is this kind of gets into one of my objections.
Actually, more like 40 years ago. But
good
that's
God,
beside the point.
yeah, fair enough. It gets into my objection with the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film, where they took the character Chekhov, who was like, he was basically a young, relatable character on Star Trek. They brought him in to essentially kind of pull in the Davy Jones crowd, and that's why he looked the way he did, because they live like Davy Jones was like the top celebrity teen idol, and they were hoping to kind of get girls to watch the show, young kids. Anyways, but the Chekhov character in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films was played off like a joke. Okay, and that right there, like. That was enough to ruin those movies for me, because Chekhov is not a joke. He's a good character, well performed, well acted. Like a character was. He was the young, inexperienced ensign, but he was taken seriously enough. He was just, he was basically the officer that needed seasoning. He wasn't a joke, right? And I didn't like that they played Gimli off as the joke in Lord of the Rings, right? Well, here we have. Spider-Man Noir, if you've read the comic books, they're really well put together. They take seriously, and they're very edgy, and they also benefit very heavily from the fact that they're not mired down in the continuity and the business. Spider-Man Noir has the freedom to be what it needs to be, right? But this Spider-Man Noir was a joke. He was basically there to play for laughs, because like the original one doesn't come from a black and white world. The majority of everybody
kind of had that kind of made for laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent. And also, this was more of a literal version of noir.
That is
like
true.
The actual word noir being black, opposed to being actually from like the comic book series where it's taking place during the 1920s, 30s.
Yeah.
And you've got that... like our episode that we did a while ago.
Well, the thing is like they've done this version. That's the version they now have to continue to use. Like, because an actual Spider-Man Noir movie would be amazing if they did the book, right? But they can't now, because
not necessarily. I mean, it's like, how many times have these other various properties that have come up where they've done something different, and then granted, it might be years or decade later that they actually fix it or like clean up the timeline.
Well, I'm just saying, like Sony is going to use.
Well, that's also presuming that like Sony keeps this property.
Yeah.
And,
well, I mean,
it's like your statement about like talking about Apple. If they buy it, then what happens to the rights? Does it go back to?
It's pretty likely it's going to revert. But they're also already planning 2 sequels. So the movie's doing well enough. Like, because the lady who was producer on this, who's unfortunate because she was actually. Let me pull the name up here. Sorry, Amy Pascal. Okay, so she's the person who is basically responsible for the Ghostbusters reboot. And happened that, right? So she's been connected to some really bad movies, and she, of course, is the producer on this movie. I don't believe she has anything to do with its success, but her name's there, right? So she can.
Okay.
But anyways, regardless, she had been attempting to. She had basically greenlit all these Spider-Man sequels before they even knew that Amazing Spider-Man was going to be successful or not, right? And one of the things that she was planning was an all-female-led movie called Glass Ceiling.
Okay.
Which was, basically like, because she has a very heavy feminist agenda in Hollywood.
Okay.
Anyways,
what is
she
glass?
What
is glass?
Well, glass ceiling is the fact that women can only advance so high, but men have no limit.
Oh,
right. So
I feel very ignorant.
Yeah. So it's not a very subtle thing that she's got going on there, and like the whole reason why the Ghostbusters sequel reboot was all women was because she was pushing a feminist agenda, not trying to create a good film. Right. And that was not even a factor. in the creation of that film is like, no, I'm in charge. I run Sony. I have a feminist agenda. This is what we're making, right? And basically, fuck the fans. That's essentially what happened, right? Well, she finally gets to make her Glass Ceiling movie, but she's going to do it animated now, and it's going to be Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, Silk. I don't know, like basically every female Spider character is going to be starring in that movie. And that's it's interesting because like they've got this hit, they're already going to go ahead with more sequels, and I think that if they can capture what was good about this one, then I'm excited for more. But if it's just going to be like, okay, well, we're pushing an agenda now. Like I now get to have my feminist agenda movie.
No, I get that.
Like,
I mean, it's a mixed baggage because it's like, thinking back about as science fiction, fantasy, and even a certain level of comics, there are certain levels of agendas that have been done within it, within these various properties. As you take a look at social, economical, society, basically. Taking aspects and writing about it as the culture goes. Like a good example is Judge Dredd. The English company that originally created Judge Dredd wrote it to basically say like, this is what was going on with America. This was a look at the race riots, the wars, and the problems that were going on with America, and going to like, okay, as the extreme that will eventually happen is they'll go through an apocalypse, sugar, caffeine, drugs, and various other things become completely illegal.
Well,
and
the thing with Judge Dredd, right, is Judge Dredd came from an original point of creativity. Somebody had a pitch.
But I mean, that's the point of like what I was trying to get to is that as you take a look at science fiction, fantasy, comics, and whatever property, the bigger thing is that level of creativity, that level of you got to make an interesting story.
Yeah.
Because it's like there are a lot of and I've watched a good amount, like the Star Wars ripoffs, as I like to call it, especially after the 1980s and even into the 90s and going
like
on
Star
forward.
Crashed or something.
Oh gosh, there's so many. Turkish Star Wars is fantastic in a horrible way that makes you need to like go to a free clinic or such afterwards. But at the same time, there's the point of like the interesting story. Like Star Wars does have some hokey parts to it, but it does have a pretty good story, for what it's worth.
Yeah, well,
and it's like that's the thing. It's like the original part of Ghostbusters was fantastic. Of like, this urban magic. Ghosts are real. This is what's going on. This is the story of like these. Three scientists that pick up this additional gentleman, and the four of them go kick butt and take names and
save the world.
And there's some really hokey parts within that movie, and there's some parts where it's like, wow, this is really 80s, but at the same time it's like, I thought it's a good written story.
Well,
and I think that's kind of the thing, at least for me, is like, there's certain aspects where it's like, I enjoyed enough of like the 2016 Ghostbuster, 2024
the reboot.
The reboot. What year did it come out?
It's been a couple of years now.
Yeah. Anyways, doesn't matter, but it's like
I could look it up if you want
it. It doesn't really matter that much. I'm just kind of ranting on this of like saying that as a movie for me, it's like I saw it as this was enough of like a popcorn flick.
The Ghostbusters?
Yeah. Okay. I saw it in the $2 theater. I didn't feel like I wasted my money. And
I wouldn't even pay $2 for that.
I just saw it as like, okay, it had some decent parts within the movie, but the story wasn't like I could really recall a lot of detail because it wasn't strong on that part.
Well,
And that's just kind of my point of like this is that whatever goes on, like with this Glass Ceiling or whatever movie that comes next, is the storytelling. It's the part of like, why do I care? What makes it interesting? Is it the fact of like your agendas, your points of view?
Do you mind if I jump in?
Sure.
Okay. So the thing that I was trying to get to was that like, say Stan Lee, right? He comes up with the Fantastic Four. Okay, there was no like agenda there. He just had an idea for a story. It just happened to be they're all white. Okay, then he comes up with a character. Okay, well, let's do a black character. I've got an idea for a black character. He had inspiration, right? He had a pitch. Okay, so we got the Black Panther, we get Power Man, we get a bunch of other characters. The thing is like, this movie came about because somebody had an idea, and they had a pitch, and they knew what they wanted to do, right? And they were allowed the freedom to do it. But you don't get a good movie with a bunch of producers going, we need to hit these points,
I get you on that.
The failure of the Batman films after Michael Keaton was because they cared more about marketing
you hit these
and toy
beats.
sales than they did about whether it was a good movie. And that's what killed the movie, that movie franchise ultimately, is that they needed toys, and you need a good movie first, and in this particular case we got a good movie, but then is it going to still be a good movie because Sony's going to want to be more involved, like Deadpool 2 was fine, but for me, it kind of reeked of studio interference.
No, I can totally see that. It's like,
yeah.
Movie one felt like it was a much stronger kind of, it didn't have like amazing special effects. It showed that it didn't have that great of a budget.
But at
the same time,
that
like, budget, it was the story.
They got their money's worth out of that budget.
Oh yeah. But
sure.
No. The point is, like, what I'm saying is, like I feel like with Spider-Verse is that had a solid story, and just like Deadpool, it felt like both movies really had a solid story. And it's that level of Deadpool 2, it was all right. I mean, it was definitely
that's kind of how I felt.
Yeah, it was did I laugh? Did I enjoy it? Did I feel like I didn't waste my time? Correct on all those.
I think it was just as good as the first one.
There were certain aspects that I thought like the first one had a better kind of beat.
Yeah, well, it's just it didn't do better than the first one for me. And like Spider-Verse was a fantastic movie. It had I had high expectations. My expectations were met and exceeded. And I have really high expectations for the sequel.
Well, it's like for me, it's like Miles and his family, I thought were just wonderfully done. Like, the version of like Aunt May and the versions of Peter Parker, Fisk, Kingpin.
Yeah.
Like, all the characters actually felt like people. They all felt like they had motivation. They had like their part within the world, even if they came from like different universes.
I was really surprised when they had a Spider-Man Batcave. That definitely caught me by surprise. Hey, we're coming up on 45 minutes. So we need to wrap this up. One last thing that I want to discuss is that there's an after credit scene you definitely need to stick around for, and not ruining what it is, because that would be a disservice to the viewer. But the after credit scene dealt with Spider-Man 2099. And clearly, it basically reveals that there were other adventures taking place with other spider people. Because, like, basically, they have the convergence of the beams. Whatever's in the beam is what the machine finds in parallel universes. So because Spider-Man got hit by the thing, of course, it locates other universes with Spider-Man and pulls them to this world, right? But it also reveals that Spider-Man 2099 was gone for a couple of hours from his universe and ended up making it back. May or may not have been in the same universe with the Miles Morales Spider-Man. But then he comes back and is able to build a device based upon his experience that allows him to safely travel to other universes. Because in this one, being out of your universe, you will eventually disintegrate. and he's got a wristband, which appears to be the kind of thing which allow you to safely move to another universe without that problem. And it seemed to imply that sees some greater threat and needs to build a team, kind of like maybe it's the Inheritors from the original event. And we also see that Spider-Gwen comes back to see Miles. Does she have one of those devices? Like, they better put Spider-Man 2099 in the sequel. Like, God damn it. Because, like, I would... That's actually the thing which I really hope happens, is that, like, you could do a Spider-Man 2099 movie, and I would like to see that. Just like a straight up the story of Spider-Man 29. What I'm actually hoping happens, which I don't think it's going to, because, you know, movie studios, and I know who's running Sony now, and there's no way he'd ever be this smart. But, like, basically, this movie is so good, right, that I think that maybe Sony should focus on animated films. Like, I think that they should do a deal with Marvel, hand Spider-Man rights back to Disney, but then in exchange get the rights to make animated films that also have other MCU characters. Like, wouldn't it be something if they were making MCU animated films?
No,
like
and
this?
it's like, I think, and I'm just only going to be talking based off of like my own personal taste and likes here, but I feel like this was an amazing animated film, and it's like thinking about like some of the other various Marvel ones. They were all right. I mean,
some are better than others,
right?
But
there were some better than others, yeah, for sure. It's
probably
like,
the best one was the Doctor Strange movie.
Oh, I thought Hulk versus was I don't know.
Well, I like the Doctor Strange one because it's basically a rated R film, because it like gets it because the magic of the supernatural can be very dangerous, and it gets into aspects of that they would not dare show on an MCU film. Like one of the characters literally gets eaten to death, and all that's left is a skeleton. It's really amazing.
Except for the CG.
I thought it looked great.
Oh, yeah.
I thought
that was kind of a deal breaker.
It was fine. You know, I thought they handled the origin of Doctor Strange a little bit better in that movie too. But anyways, hey, we're out of time. We need to wrap this video up.
Yeah.
So Spider-Verse, which we barely talked about. Man, go see that movie. It's if you have not seen it yet, if you're on the fence, don't. It's better than Aquaman. Just go see the movie. It's really it's worth it.
Yeah, and definitely thank you for viewing. Stay nerdy. We make comics, by the way. Check it out. Currently the address is miniaturedragon.squarespace.com, and you'll find all of our stuff there. And hopefully it's entertaining. We're putting stuff out every week. So, all right. Well, happy holidays. Bye.